You say we are now continuing a talk which we had in the last session, that is on caste and Hinduism. We discussed what Purusha Suktam said. Purusha Suktam, I said it is from the Rig Veda. Of course, not only from the Rig Veda, but it is there continuing in all the other Vedas also. Today, we'll have a talk on, or rather, we'll see what the Bhagavad Gita says. Because Purusha Sukta said, it described the whole cosmos as one organic entity. And then it said Brahmana became the mouth, Kshatriya became the shoulder, and this Vaishya became the thigh, and Shudra became the feet. So that is what it said. And almost condemned as in the sense that all the modern critics, they take that as the reference point. So now we have to see what other texts also say and what is the overall spirit. So the overall spirit has to be seen. I told you that what was described in the Rig Veda and other Vedas was only a sort of a visualization of the whole universe as one organic entity in order to inculcate the notion that we are part and parcel of this entire universe. And then we have to behave in a responsible way towards all beings, behave in a responsible way to the nature. All the what we say commons, global common, nowadays they use a new word called global common. So like that, we have, and also climate justice. So all these things are included in that visualization. That is, we have to be respectful to the whole nature. We have to be respectful to all the people. We have to see divinity in all the people. Sarvatma bhava. So that is what it says. So now we see, let us see what the Gita says. Now, of course, we know that Gita also is sometimes quoted to blame Hinduism. That is, Lord Krishna in the 4th chapter talks about Chaturvarnyam in the 4th chapter, that is the 13th shloka. He says, Chaturvarnyam maya srushtam guna karma vibhagashaha. Tasya kartaram apimam vidya kartaram avyayam. The whole shloka is like that, but the first line is important. Chaturvarnyam maya srushtam guna karma vibhagashaha. What does it mean? It says, this whole structure of this Chaturvarnyam, this Vyavastha, what we call this structure called Chaturvarnyam, is created by me. Me means not Lord Krishna as a person, son of Vasudeva, etc. Me means he is talking about, he is talking as the spokesperson of that supreme reality, because Krishna is an avatar. In this particular body, he is a Krishna, but his actual form, not exactly form, his actual, in reality, what is he? In reality, he is that supreme Brahman. He is that supreme reality or supreme, the one and one only truth, what we call Brahman or Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So in that, when it is manifesting as the whole universe, he is one of the manifestations. He is one big manifestation, that is Avatara, as we call it. And so from that point of view, he is telling as the spokesperson of that entire reality. So, I'm sorry to silence it. So he is speaking as the spokesperson of the whole supreme reality. So he is talking about the duty. In the 2nd chapter and 3rd chapter of the Gita, we all know that he talks about Karma Yoga. He also talks about, first of all, he talks about what is Jiva, and he also talks about Jnana Yoga. He also talks about Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is every person in the society has to perform his allotted duty. In Indian society, if you see our, say, the Dharma Shastras and all that, for every person in the society, the duties are earmarked. And how are the duties earmarked? Because there are certain categories. And how is that categorization made? That is what Krishna is going to say in this particular shloka. Chaturvarnyam maya srushtam guna karma vibhagasha. Guna, the word guna is very important. Guna, in the nature, in the entire creation, there are 3 tendencies. These three tendencies are there in every inch of nature. It may be an animal, it may be a plant, it may be anything, it may be a human being, not only here sitting in India, but somebody is sitting in Australia, somebody sitting in America, somebody sitting in Africa. All the people have these 3 gunas. All the whole nature comprises these 3 gunas. What are the names given are Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva guna. Because we also see these are the personality types. In fact, Lord Krishna is mainly mentioning the personality types, and you have to allocate duty depending on the type of personality. In every society, even in modern organizations, we do the same. Aptitude tests, people conduct aptitude tests, and then depending on the personality of a person, they allocate duties. So similarly, Krishna says, Sattva Guna. What is this Sattva Guna? Sattva Guna manifests. It is there in all the beings also, all animals also, I said, but we are now concerned with the human beings. Among human beings or in the human beings, how does it manifest? A person who is quiet, contentment is one important feature. Contentment means not due to foolishness, not because of foolishness, but he is aware of the unreality of all the things around the world, unreality or ephemeral nature or impermanent nature of what all our desires. So he is interested in knowledge. He is interested in knowing about what is the highest truth. He is interested in ahimsa. First of all, ahimsa is absolute total non-violence, and he is interested in the pursuit of knowledge. And these are the virtues. These are the gunas. These are the not exactly virtues, we can say. These are the and also he has got the tendency for tapas. Tapas actually is thinking. The tapas, the word tapas has several meanings. One of the meanings is to think. He's a thinker, number one. And also tapa also means endurance. Even if there is some adversity, he takes it. He takes it in the stride. He doesn't complain. He doesn't go about shouting or crying. He doesn't go onto the streets with some sticks and all that. He has a capacity to endure. So these are the things. Basically, truthfulness. Satyam, Dhanam, Ahimsa, Satyam is again truthfulness. So these are the things. These are the qualities with which a person who is having Sattva Guna, he is seen. There are other types of people who are quite achieving in nature. The Sattva Guna man is not very achieving in nature. He is only achieving in the sense that he is pursuing knowledge. He wants to know the truth. But the other person, he is achieving. Achieving in the sense, achievement in the worldly sense. This other gentleman, Sattva gentleman, also he is an achiever in the other world, not even otherworldly, in the sense of knowing the truth. But the second type of man, he is an achiever in the worldly sense. He wants to achieve power. He wants to get a lot of money, amass a lot of money, and he wants to rule over others. Basically, Ishvara Bhavasya. Gita says Ishvara Bhava is the tendency to rule over, to dominate others. And he may be interested in knowledge, because even to rule over, he needs knowledge. But that knowledge he uses in order to rule, in order to govern, in order to control. That is how he uses his knowledge. And maybe sometimes he may have to do himsa also, because suppose a king is there, there is some enemy king who is coming and invading. So this man has to fight back. The man has to fight back and then establish his presence. So he may have to use violence. So this is one type of Rajoguna. It is called Rajoguna. Another type of Rajoguna is tendency to acquire wealth, particularly a businessman, for example. He also takes interest, and knowledge also is required for him, because unless knowledge is there, you can't be an achiever, you can't be a good businessman also. So that knowledge he uses for his business, his trade, and then he is a more generous, a person who is a very generous businessman, or he also does business with some amount of ethics. These are the things which are there in that person, and he is one particular category. He may be traveling abroad. We know that all our business people, particularly of South India, they colonized, or rather, he went to all these South Asian countries and then actually spread our culture in all those countries. Our Chola kings and Pandya kings, these are the people who went to all these South Asian countries, and they established even a huge Angkor Wat. We know that Angkor Wat. Initially, the people who went were only traders. Only thereafter, some Kshatriyas went there, and then he established an empire there, and Cambodia, Thailand, and all these places, and Malaysia, all these places. So that is what we see. These are the people who are achieving in nature. So among the people who are achieving in nature, there are two classes. One is a person who is a ruler, and a person who is a trader. And the another one, Varna is there, that is Tamo Guna. Tamo Guna, Tamas is another Guna. Tamas is what is this Tamas? So, sort of dullness, darkness. Tama actually means darkness, Tamas, lack of initiative, not self-motivated person. but he is driven by others. But when driven by others, he goes even violently. When driven by others, okay, you go and kill that fellow, he goes and kills. So he is a person who is guided by others. He can indulge in violence. He can also be easily made soft, but he is a person who is basically guided by the person. And sometimes he can be, depending on who is his boss and who is the person who is guiding, his personality depends on that. So that is what we see. These four categories. One is a particular person who is predominantly having this sattva guna. Another person who is two types of people who are having predominantly rajoguna, but one is having a tendency to dominate and rule. Other is having a tendency to acquire wealth and basically a trader. The other person, the last category, is the person who doesn't have that self-initiative drive and all that, and he is a person who is guided by others. So now let us see for that shloka what traditional acharyas, that is the teachers, have written. I will read out from the commentary. Luckily for us, we have all these Gita commentaries on the Gita supersite.iitk.ac.in. Most of you might be knowing. So he says, Sattva Pradhanasya Brahmanasya. So a person who is having the Sattva Guna Pradhana, he is called Brahmana. You have to give a name. So that is how the name has been given. He is called a Brahmana because this Sattvaguna is a thing, a tendency to pursue truth. And the truth is what we call as Brahman. Truth, that the highest reality, is what we call Brahma. That is how we have defined. So the person who is following that thing, who wants to know that, who wants to live by that standard, he is called Brahmana. Brahma, from that word only Brahmana has come. So Sattva-guna pradhanasya brahmanasya shamo damaha tapaha ityadini karmani. What are his duties? Shama. Shama is antarindriya nigraha. Antarindriya nigraha means control of the mind. Not only the control of the external, the five senses, but control of the mind. Because you may control your five senses, but then your mind may be wandering. Mind may be very wildly wandering and wildly thinking. So this control of the mind is very, very important. So Shamaha, Damaha, Tapaha, Ityadini Karmani. Tapaha, he is the person who is supposed to do tapas. He is supposed to retreat into the forest. He is supposed to lead a simple life. The person is not expected to make money. A Brahmana in olden days, he was not expected to make money. Nowadays, we see, thanks to in this IT field and whatnot, Brahmins have come out of poverty. Otherwise, if you go some 3-4 generations back, we see most of them lived in extreme poverty, or at least poverty, if not extreme poverty. So these people, they were not expected. They were not expected to make, make money. Even if you see people like Tyagaraja and people like that, they lived in extreme poverty. Tyagaraja or Purandaradasa or some other people like various other people that any saint you see, they lived in poverty only. So Shamaha, Damaha, Tapad, Ityadini Karmani. Then for the other person, which is the dominant guna, Rajoguna is dominant, but Sattva guna is number 2 position. For this, it is not in the Brahmin, Sattva guna is in predominant position. It doesn't mean that he does not have Rajoguna and Tamoguna. He also has some component of Rajoguna and Tamoguna, because all three, they mix in every being, in every entity on earth. So even Sattva-guna, even a Brahmin has got some Rajoguna and some Tamoguna also. So, but then predominance is of Sattva-guna. So similarly, in the Kshatriya, the predominance is in Rajoguna, and the second position is taken by Sattva-guna. Sattva-guna, which is dominant in Brahmin, takes the second position in a Kshatriya. And of course, Tamoguna, the third position. And in the case of a Kshatriya, in the case of a Vaishya, what happens? Rajoguna is in predominant position, no doubt. But Sattva-guna is not in the second position. It is the Tamoguna comes to the second position. Tamoguna comes to the second position. He is a person who is traveling and mixing with a lot many people, and then some little bit of say you will be going around places. So that Tamoguna is Tama Upasarjana Rajah Pradhanasya. Tama Upasarjana means Tama becomes secondary and Rajoguna becomes Pradhana for that Vaishya. Krushyadini Karmani. Now we see that Vaishya, when we say Vaishya, nowadays we have a tendency to identify with some small group of people who are what we call baniyas or traders. We say this Vaishya means, normally in Telugu we say Komati. and Baniya in Hindi. But according to the Gita, or till, I mean, much, I mean, at the time of Gita, and also much later times, till later times, Vaishya, the word Vaishya meant Krushi Gaurakshya Vanijyam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam. This definition of Vaishya is again in the 18th chapter of the same Gita. 18th chapter, Krushi Gaurakshya Vanijyam. Here also in the 4th chapter, Shankaracharya says, Krushyadini Karmani. Krushi Gaurakshya Vanijyam. Krushi means, what does Krushi mean? Krushi means agriculture. Gaurakshya means Gona, Gavam, Rakshanam. That is cattle rearing, what we say, cattle herd, a cow herd. Lord Krishna himself was a cow herd. Lord Krishna, according to the definition of Gita, he himself is a Vaishya. That is how we see in the Mahabharata also, all these Kshatriyas, they ridicule him. Arey, you, Yadava. Yadava is somebody who was attending on cows and cows mostly. So these were looked down upon by the Kshatriyas. So that is how Krishna is very often looked down by this Duryodhana and other people. So this Krishna, according to the Gita, he was a Vaishya. And again, Krushi Gaurakshya Vanijyam. Vanijyam is trade. Nowadays, only some traders are recognized as Vaishyas. And the other people who were agriculturists and the other people who were cattle herds, they are not treated as Vaishyas. Maybe over a period of time, if we see history, when so many invasions took place on our country, most of these people in this category, Vaishya category, Vaishya is common citizens, mostly common citizens, rich citizens, let us say. All these rich citizens, they gave up these karmas, they gave up the duties. The duties means, first of all, I have to say that all these three categories, that is Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, they were entitled for the study of Vedas. Not only entitled, it was mandated. It was mandated not only for a Brahmana, mandated for a Kshatriya, mandated for a Vaishya, mandated for a Vaishya means Krushi, Gaurakshya, Vanijam. For the farmer class, Vedas were mandated. For the business class, Vedas were mandated. For the cattle herd, Yadavas, Krishna, Balarama, etc. Krishna also, we know that Krishna went to Sandipani Muni's house and then the ashrama, and then he learnt Vedas along with our Sudama, our good old friend Sudama, who was a very poor Brahmin. So like that, these people, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, these three categories, they learned the Vedas. They were not only learning, but it was mandated. It was a duty for them to learn. But we see in history that over a period of time, when the invaders came and then when started torturing people, whoever had a sacred thread on them. So all these three categories, they were called Dvijas. Dvija means twice born. Brahmana, Dvija not only means Brahmana. Dvija means a Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. So these three people, they were called Dvijas because they all had this ceremony of Yajnopavita. So this Yajnopavita it is like giving a second birth. So that is the reason why they were called Dvija. Dvija means twice born. So, but because of invasions, most of the people, they gave up the rituals, they gave up study of Vedas and called themselves Shudras or identified themselves as Shudras. That again, we'll see in the next talk. What Mahabharata in other parts of Mahabharata. Of course, we know that Gita is again a small part of Mahabharata only. Today, we are now confined to discussion on Gita. But maybe in the next talk, I will tell what the other portions of Mahabharata says. So these three categories, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, all the three categories were called Dvijas, who were twice born and who were mandated to read the Vedas. And which was the last class? The last class, which was predominantly Tamoguna is number one. Say for a Brahmana, Tattvaguna is number one place. For Kshatriya and also Vaishya, Rajoguna is in the second place. For the third person, Tamoguna, slightly dull person, lacking self-initiative, lacking initiative, drive, etc. Such person, he was called a Shudra. And what are his duties? His duties are basically to follow others because he is not having a drive of his own. So he has to follow others. So this was the structure in olden days. If we see the situation, these three categories, particularly the Vaishya category, included a large population. Maybe Brahmanas were small in number, Kshatriyas were also small in number, but this third category, Vaishya, it included a vast mass of people. whatever what we now call OBC or whatever, or OC also. Most of the OC people, minus Brahmins, they were all say in this category, either in Kshatriya category or in Vaishya category. Most of the OBCs were in Vaishya category. Nowadays, we Lalu Yadav or some other Yadav, they call themselves as BCs. But in olden days, they were also studying Vedas. Lalu Yadav's forefathers, they studied the Vedas. So that is how this all these Vaishyas, they call themselves as Shudras. And now we see that a whole mass of Shudras. But in olden days, if we see this structure, according to Gita, probably about 20% of the people belong to that category, 20-25. So probably that was the situation. So anyway, that is the picture. And one point which we have to mention, keep in mind, is that in every person, even in the Shudra, some element of Sattva is there, some element of Rajoguna is there. In the Kshatriya, there is some element of Rajoguna, Sattva Guna, some element of Tamoguna. In the Brahmana, there is some element of Rajoguna, some element of Tamoguna. So the combination of all these three gunas in infinite proportions, they make so many categories. Then who was able to decide? So that we'll see when we have a talk on the Manusmriti, because the Manusmriti, it says, I can briefly tell now, according to that, in those olden days, there was a system of examining a boy. A system of examining a boy, maybe at the age of 8 or so. Acharya used to test him, test his general tendency, and then he used to decide, oh, this fellow is fit to be in this Brahmana category. This fellow is fit to be in the Kshatriya category. This fellow is fit to be in Shudra category or Vaishya category. So at that time, it was there. But when the society grew and became very, very large, probably unwieldy, and also because traditionally a Brahmin's son, he has the advantage of learning, because his father is reciting mantras, his grandfather is reciting mantras, his elder brother is reciting all these Vedic mantras. So naturally, this fellow also will learn, will pick up very quickly. This fellow also has a tendency to behave in the same manner. So there is a sort of advantage of environment, not only heredity, but advantage of environment. So because of that advantage, so this person, he showed those qualities, Brahmin qualities, and obviously he continued like that. Similarly, a Kshatriya child who was seeing arrows and swords right from the beginning, he also started wielding swords and arrows and then shooting arrows. So he developed that tendency. So naturally, a king's son became a Kshatriya's son became a Kshatriya, a Brahmana's son became a Brahmana. So it continued, it was accepted for some time. But there can be a question. There can be a question which is there in Mahabharata itself. The Mahabharata itself, I'll read out the passage. In the 18th chapter, there is one question. But even here also, even here in this particular 4th chapter, the line which I read, Chaturvaranyam maya sustam guna karma vibhagashaha. Depending on the gunas, the karma is given. Karma means duty. Guna karma vibhagashaha is most important, because depending on the guna, karma was given, not depending on the jati or birth. Not depending on the birth. So at Krishna's time, this is what Krishna's structure was. And even in the Manusmriti also, that will come later. So in the 18th chapter again, there are 2 or 3 shlokas referring to again this Brahmana Kshatriya, 18th chapter, 41st shloka. If you see, you can just refer to Gita. And if you also have a Bhashyam, there is one commentary called Nilakanta Bhashyam. If you see that commentary by Nilakanta, he quotes from the other portions of Mahabharata. So he quotes from one episode called Nahusha Prashna. I'll discuss it in detail later. But in brief, I can say that there is another episode in Mahabharata which is called Nahusha Prashna. In that, this question comes. Suppose a Brahmin is there, and the son, he doesn't have all these qualities like ahimsa, satyam, daya, etc., etc. Somehow he is born, the fellow is somehow born, and the fellow is untruthful, and then he is a person who is violent in nature, who is, say, very mean. So such person. Can you call him a Brahmin? So such question comes. And suppose there is another person in the Shudra category, very, very pious person, very truthful, very honest. So probably in great association with the Brahmanas, we do not know, but somehow he is having those qualities. If he is having those qualities, how should he be treated? And a person who is born to a Brahmin parent and not having these Brahmana gunas, how should he be treated? So this question arises. So there, Mahabharata is very, very frank, very, very frank. Nobody can question, nobody can point a finger at sage Vyasa. So he says, tasmin yasmin kasminchid varne shamadayah drishyante saha shudropi edaihi lakshanaihi brahmana eva jnatavyah. So he says, yasmin kasminchid varne, in whatever varna it is, it may be a Brahmana varna, it may be a Kshatriya varna, or whatever varna. Shamadayah drishyante. Shama means antahkarana indriya, that is nigraha, that is control of senses, control of mind, restraint, ahimsa. When these qualities are seen, he should be treated as Shudropi, etaihi lakshanaihi brahmana eva jnatavyah. Even if he were to be a Shudra, he has to be treated as a Brahmin. He has to be considered a Brahmin. Then, yatracha brahmanepi Shudra dharma drishyante saha Shudra eva. Yatracha, and also brahmanepi, in a Brahmin, Shudra dharmaha drishyante. If the characteristics of a Shudra are seen, he should be treated as Saha Shudra eva, not even treated as he is a Shudra. That is what it says, Saha Shudra eva. Then Tathacha Aranyake Sarvabhutam Nahusham Prati. So he is referring to what Yudhishthira replied to Nahusha in that episode of Nahusha Prashnas. He says, Satyam, Danam, Kshama, Sheelam, Anushamsyam, Tapo, Gruna. I am reading all these shlokas because we have to know what our texts say. It is not as though I am reading out to know my knowledge of Sanskrit or anything, because most of the people now, our problem is we have not seen the original text. If we have not seen the original text, we cannot advance proper arguments. If we know our text, in order to know our text, we have to know some language also. Nowadays, luckily, there are many people who are pursuing Sanskrit studies. Luckily, fortunately, many youngsters are studying Sanskrit. It is a very happy thing for me. And the only thing they have to do is they have to come to these subjects. They have to see where exactly we are being hit by our critics. So when we know that, then nobody can shake us, nobody can confuse us. So you see here, Satyam, Danam, Shama, Sheelam, Anushamsyam, Tapo, Gruna. That is truthfulness, Shama, forgiveness, and not only forgiveness, but ability to, even when there is a problem, ability to tolerate, ability to be restrained. Then Sheelam, character, Anushamsyam, that is absence of cruelty. Tapaha, tapa is that is thinking and also doing his dharma properly. And gruna is compassion. All these things, yatra dushyante yatra nagendra sabbrahmana iti shutaha. When these qualities are there in a person, he should be a brahmana. Then yatra etal lakshyate sarpa. Sa Brahmana Smataha. Yatra etan na bhavet sarpa tam shudramiti nidishet. When these qualities are not there, he should be treated as a Shudra. So it is very, very clearly mentioned in the Mahabharata without any sort of partiality, without any sort of hesitation, that if the qualities are not there, he is to be downgraded. So probably in olden days when this system began, probably there was a system of gradation and downgrading. So that is the reason why we see I'll go to the other text also in the next discussion, where one person, Rishi or a sage or a king, for example, Rishabhadeva, he has got several sons. Some of them become Kshatriyas and some of them become Brahmins. And there are other characters also, some other stories where one sage is there, one son becomes a Brahmana, another man is a Shudra, another man is a Vaishya. So somewhat like that. So like that, it was not a fixed thing. But over a period of time, because of so much of social change and so many turbulences in the Indian society, so we had several changes. And now we are here. So the most important point here we see is, in this 18th chapter also, Brahmana Kshatriya Visham, 18 chapter 41, shloka, I refer to that. The most important line is, Brahmana Kshatriya Visham Shudranancha Parantapa Karmani Pravibhaktani Swabhava Prabhavaihi Gunaihi. This fourth pada is most important. Swabhava Prabhavair Gunaihi. That is Swabhava. He is naturally endowed with that Swabhava. Swabhava, we also know use the word Swabhava. What is Swabhava is like that. Swabhava is nature. Nature means whether it is predominantly Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, or Tamoguna. Swabhava Prabhavaihi Gunaihi, depending on the innate nature, depending on the inherent nature in that person, or the qualities with which he is endowed, the duties are given to him. So that is what the 14th chapter, 18th chapter, sloka number 41 says. And that is what Gita, the 4th chapter, 13th sloka also he said, Guna karma vibhagashaha. Guna karma vibhagashaha. That is, depending on the guna, karmas are given. Here, swabhava prabhavair gunaihi, depending on the swabhava. Swabhava again refers to guna only. Swabhava means sattva guna, rajo guna, tamo guna, etc. So depending on that, we have to see whether he belongs to which category. Then finally, one important point which we have to notice about the Dvijas. Dvija is a twice born. That is the person who all underwent that ceremony of Upanayanam. They were all called Dvijas. And these are the people, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, all the three categories were called Dvijas. And this Vaishya category, it covered a vast majority of population. That is agriculturists, traders, and cattle herds. In olden days, we see that cattle herds, the Yadavas, they were very, very large in number. And in history, we see that the Yadavas, they had several empires all over the world, all over the country. Starting from starting from north, right down to, you see Karnataka, if you go, all this Yadava empire, Yadava kings only, they built that huge, say, temples, Halebeed, Belur, etc. So in most places, we see these Yadava kings, because these are the cattle wealth was the wealth in olden days. So that is the reason we see in Mahabharata also, Kauravas, they go and capture the cows or all the cattle, or Virata Raja. So this Dvija constituted at least 75 to 80% of the population. And we have to remember that all these people, they were studying Vedas. It is not as though the study of Vedas was denied to a large number of people. It is not as though it was the confine of Brahmins alone. Brahmin was the big teacher. The only teachers were Brahmins. But no knowledge of the Vedas, knowledge of all these Upanishads was available to all. And knowledge of the Puranas available to Sudras also, everybody. Itihasa and Purana for the Sudras also. It is not as though Sudras were excluded from this knowledge. That is how we see that in Mahabharata, Vidura was there. Vidura is a Shudra. But then he was the wisest man. In the Mahabharata, he is the wisest man. And when Dhritarashtra asks him, tell me, what is that supreme reality? Tell me that, give me that knowledge of Brahman. Then he says, I know it, but then I am not supposed to say. Because I am not a Brahmana, he says. Because he also is following a particular code which was respected in those days. So he says, okay, I will invite Sanat Sujata. And he prays to Sanat Sujata. Sanat Sujata appears, and then Sanat Sujata teaches Vedanta to Dhritarashtra. Of course, Dhritarashtra never follows that instruction. He knows, but then he doesn't follow. That is the greatness of Dhritarashtra. He knows what is right and what is wrong, but he doesn't follow. So that is how we see that only the servant class is available everywhere, all over the world. You go to White House, the President of America, even in the White House, there will be a servant. Everywhere, servants are there all over the world. So only that particular class, because they don't have time to study, they don't have that place and time to study. They will have to work maybe around the clock. He has to be a watchman. He has to be standing at the gate of a king. He has to be doing some other service. So they did not study, but all other people studied the Vedas. So this is what we have to see about the Varna, the caste and Hinduism. But here again, we have to see this caste has nothing to do here. We are only talking about Varna. How this caste has come into existence and what does it mean, we'll see in some other session. So for now, we have just seen what is there mentioned in the Gita. So now we'll stop here. Thank you.